Hi everyone, welcome to the Communication and Conflict YouTube channel promoting mindful communication, growth through conflict. So today's video is about Principle 7 in the book, A Guide to Effective Communication for Conflict Resolution. And that principle is that we challenge or sometimes explore the behavior, not the person. So the point behind this principle is about the fact that quite often in difficult conversations, what can happen very easily is people resort to using labels for other people. So they may call someone a bully, they may say someone's unreasonable. On an ongoing basis, people may have other labels for people, so they may say they're lazy, or or just any other kind of critical label. Although it's what we're talking about today also can apply to positive labels as well, and I'll explain a bit about that later. But it's the ineffectiveness of that when we're having a conversation, or particularly when we're having a difficult conversation. As with most of the principles, when everything's hunky-dory, everything's fine, most of them don't really matter that much, but particularly when we're having a difficult conversation, their relevance becomes very much more prominent. Their significance and the importance of considering them becomes much more important, because they can be the key to kind of allowing the conversation or the relationship or the communication that's being created to return to being effective communication if we take the principles into consideration. So, for example, in difficult situations, someone may say, okay, my boss is a bully. So when I'm a mediator and I come across someone in a workplace dispute and they use that phrase, my first question to them will be, okay, so what is it they do that leads you to say they're a bully? Because just saying someone's a bully doesn't really convey anything useful. We can all imagine what that means, but we'll all have different interpretations of what the significance of that label is. But if I say to someone, okay, so you say your boss is a bully, what is it they do that leads you to say that? They'll then start to talk about the things that have happened that means they've come to that label of bully. So it's the things that have happened that are the significant parts of what's led to the breakdown in the relationship or the difficulties within the relationship. And so then there's something to start working on. It's very unlikely that you can ever work on whether someone is or is not a bully, because it's kind of either or. But the second you start to get detail about what underlies someone's reason for labeling someone as a bully, you can start to look at those particular behaviours. So they may say, okay, they shout at me when I get things wrong, or they stand behind me and criticise me when I'm doing something at work, or they overlook me, my contributions in meetings, or they criticise them in front of everyone. So there can be all these different kind of behaviours which are the significant factors in the breakdown in the relationship. So exploring the behaviour and not the person is useful, because then you've got the detail of where the problem lies. And the other side to it is that if we label other people, they're much less likely to want to engage with us. If I say to someone, because of something they've done, if I just say, you're a bully, it's likely to mean that they're just going to kind of become defensive and entrench in anything they've done, because they haven't been told anything about what it is they've done that leads me to call them a bully. So they're likely to put walls up and become very defensive and perhaps criticize me in return by saying, you're too sensitive, or you're just trying to, if it's a workplace dispute, for example, you're just trying to get off from not doing your work properly, and this is your excuse by calling me a bully. So then you get all the defensiveness comes into the discussion, instead of, when you shout at me. So instead of me calling someone a bully, if I say, look, when you shout at me, it's not helping the situation. So whatever it is you want to say, can you not shout it? And also, can we sit down and have a discussion about it, instead of you shouting at me, or instead of you standing behind me just pointing out all the things I'm doing wrong on my computer screen in front of everybody? Can you sit down next to me, or can we go off and have a more one-to-one discussion in where it's not in front of everyone. So we know what we can work with and what we can change. But if I just say, "Oh, you're being a bully," the person doesn't first of all doesn't understand specifically what it is I'm discussing. Even if we think they should know, we're not conveying it to them. So they're not telepaths, they're not mind readers, they don't know what we mean when we say they're a bully. So therefore it doesn't effectively convey what our concern is. And so it doesn't work as a way of trying to deal with a difficult situation. And as I say, the likely response from the other person is simply to be defensive and to entrench, because the point about this principle is that when we practice this principle, we're acknowledging that people can change. We're acknowledging that we might see someone in a certain situation. So, for example, someone, and I use this example in the book, someone may come to my place and see, I don't know, maybe I've left some clothes on the floor or something, or maybe I've kind of not seemed to have cleaned up the place for a few days. And so they might visit and go away and say, "Oh, Alan's a very dirty, slovenly or lazy person." So they're labeling me in that way. But maybe they haven't understood that maybe I've been ill for the last 2 weeks and I've just been too tired or too unwell to do that. So they've come in and they've attributed a label to me as if that's who I am as a person. That now boxes me as a person as being lazy or slovenly or whatever they say. So therefore they're not acknowledging that on a different day, if they came round, maybe my place would be very clean and, tidied up, and there won't be clothes on the floor and there won't be things on the carpet because I haven't hoovered or whatever. So therefore the label wouldn't apply then. But the second they attribute that label to me, the chances are they're then going to be looking for other examples of where I fit that label, because they've now got a label for me. So this is where, when we attribute labels to people, it actually means we're contributing to a breakdown in our relationship with that person. And if we don't recognize that, if we don't become mindful of how we're communicating in such situations, it's more likely that the situation will become worse, because in a sense it's almost like the detail of the interaction between us shuts down. So instead of me dealing with a thing that's happened, we're dealing with labels that we use for each other, and those labels are very limited in what they allow for in terms of detail of what the actual problem is that might be existing between us. So therefore it is basically an ineffective way of communicating. So if I give you an example from the book, just as a kind of a simple example of two different statements, that one uses labels and one still deals with an issue but allows a possibility and supports the possibility for change, or for assistance, or for there to be a further interaction with the other person. So for example, so Jamie, you haven't done your homework again. I think your parents will need to know how lazy you are. Are we writing home to them about this? Now this could be a teacher or a tutor talking to somebody who to a child who perhaps is not performing as the person would expect in the tutoring sessions or in school or whichever. But it's not a very effective way of communicating with the child about the problem, because it's simply labeling them as lazy, but not supporting them in the possibility of changing in any way. So it gives them a negative label, which in itself isn't very useful and perhaps not a very nice thing to do, but it's also not supporting any possibility for change, other than perhaps the reason that sometimes people think labels will serve, or the purpose that people think labels will serve, which is to kind of guilt trip people into changing. And honestly, in all my life, I've never known that to be an effective way of bringing about change, just to call people a bad name in the belief that that means they're going to change, because instead it means they're more likely to entrench in their situation. But entirely the same situation can be dealt with in a different way. So here's a different way of dealing with that. So, okay, Jamie, this is the second time you haven't handed in your homework. What's stopping you from being able to do this? What would help you to be able to do it? So there's no label there. It's just observing what's happened. So it's talking about the behavior, not the person. It's talking about what's happening rather than talking about the person who hasn't done the homework, the child who hasn't done the homework. So immediately it's not making it a personal label. And secondly, it immediately opens the door to exploring what could be done differently. Now, that example could be the analogy or the equivalence of that example could be used in any situation where we have a difficulty with something that someone's doing or not doing. And as I said earlier, if we think someone's bullying us, we could say stop being a bully to them. But actually it doesn't convey what the problem is that we're experiencing. We in neighbour disputes, I think I might have mentioned this in another video before, quite often people, if they're not using quite rude or abusive terms about their neighbours, they might sometimes say their neighbour's unreasonable. So it sounds a very kind of civil, measured way of speaking about the other person, but it's still a label. It's still not conveying anything useful. It's still not focusing on what the particular difficulty is or the behaviour of the other person. So even though it's not an abusive term, it's not saying, oh, they're a stupid idiot or something. Even by saying they're unreasonable, he's unreasonable, she's unreasonable, it's still a label. So it doesn't serve a useful purpose because it's not saying what it is the person's doing that I find to be unreasonable, or that I am uncomfortable with, or that I'm affected by, or I'm upset by. So when we talk about the issue, the behaviour rather of what people are doing or the actions that they've taken, it means we're not making it a personal battle with the other person. We're talking about the things that have happened. Whatever we think about the other person, we're talking about what's happened, and that allows for a constructive discussion. And this is the kind of thing that mediation supports, but there's no reason why people have to have mediation to be able to do this. It's about the fact that when we focus on simply criticizing the person, we won't ever get anywhere. We'll just stay entrenched. Whereas when we talk about their ideas or what they've done or the actions they've taken or their behaviors, it means we're talking about something kind of separate from them. We're talking about what's happened rather than who they are. So therefore, they're much more likely to be willing to engage in a discussion about it, even if they don't agree that what they've done is wrong. We're not making it a personal kind of abuse or labeling or spear throwing, as I sometimes call it, battle between us and them. So it makes it much less likely that it's become a personal kind of insult exchange. It becomes a productive, useful discussion about the things that have happened. And the point is, even if they don't agree or want to kind of acknowledge or engage in the fact that they've done something that we're upset by, at least they now know what the detail is of it, which they wouldn't know if we just simply called them a name, like unreasonable or lazy or a bully. And this is the way in which labels are very ineffective, particularly in difficult conversations, is that they don't convey anything useful. So even if we think the labels about people, if we want things to change, it won't help us to simply call them names. And in another video I've done, not in this series about the book about principles of effective communication, but in another video I did, and I can put a link to it in at the end here. It's where sometimes people think that it's useful to call someone a narcissist or a bully or a sociopath or a psychopath. A lot of people say that that they want to attribute the label of psychopath or sociopath or bully or narcissist to people that they work with. And okay, so maybe they attribute the label, but it gets them absolutely nowhere in moving forward. The only thing that I've heard people say that they think is useful to them is once they think they can identify who a sociopath is, or a psychopath, or a narcissist, or a bully, they can then stay away from them. Well, we can't spend our lives just staying away from people. We've got to be able to engage with people in a way that works for us. If we spend all our lives trying to stay away from people, we'll never go out. We'll always stay in. We'll always stay stuck. We've got to be able to learn how to engage with people in such a way that we address whatever their behaviours are, whatever label we might want to give to them. The label won't make any difference, but talking about what they do will give us a chance to assert and discuss and engage with people over their actions that we're finding difficult. And even if the other person doesn't change, calling them a bully is far less effective than talking to them about the behaviour that we're unhappy with. And the same with narcissist, or lazy, or unreasonable, or whatever. So my main point really, as you've probably gathered by now, is that calling people names, however much we might think they're justified, just doesn't work for us. So, in a sense, this isn't about being nice. It's not being about being politically correct. It just doesn't work as an effective way of communicating, to use labels towards people. So I'll leave it there. Plenty more to read in the book, if of interest. If you've got questions, if you've got comments, please let me know, either in the comment section below or contact me directly. If you like this video, if you think other people might be interested to see it, please share it with them. Please like the like button. If you want to see more videos, subscribe. And I think if you press the little bell sign, you get notifications of them as well. I'm sure if you're a YouTube user, you know all this anyway, but please do, if you like it, please share it, like it, and subscribe. And I hope to see you for the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.